All right, anybody have any questions or anything before we get started today? So we're moving over into culture, all right? Welcome, everyone. Sophie, whenever you're ready to start, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's see here. All right, can everyone see it just to make sure? Okay, so I have the first part of chapter 2 today. So that's what we're gonna be going through and having some discussion on. So just kind of an overview of what we're going to be going over today and kind of the order that everything's going to be on, just so you can know what to expect. This whole entire chapter is on the culture of fat talk. So we're going to be going through, different things in our culture that really just exacerbate the fat talk and, make it more prevalent, and like a lot of the things that in our society allow for that to happen more. So we'll go over some different gender stereotypes. We'll talk a lot about Barbies and princesses, because I thought that was the most interesting parts of the chapter. And I know that was something that was super prevalent in my family. And so I thought that was really interesting. We'll talk a lot about that. And then we're going to close up on some different sociocultural issues that are prevalent to fat talk. So first, I have a question for us that said, just what are ways that sexism is prevalent even from the time that we were babies? I'm going to pause the screen share so we can see everyone. So does anyone have an answer to that question, just to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, do the unshare, Sophie. I don't think it's, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like this when we can see everybody. Okay, so how does it start at the baby level?
I would say that the way that you talk to your children, even as you mentioned in the book, with infants, when you're like, oh, this is such a beautiful baby girl and a handsome baby boy, and like they just came out of the mother, and you're already using these terminologies and things like that. And then also the immediate swaddling of the pink or blue blanket, just drives that even from that young age.
Absolutely.
What do you all think of, it seems to be a new thing, the gender reveal parties? Which you can normally tell around, is it 16 weeks of gestation? I'm going to move because the rain is getting loud.
I personally, I don't know. I think it should be more of a celebration of a baby rather than a specific gender, because like I watch those videos and I see either like the mom or the dad upset, and like I don't like that.
Oh, you've seen people react negatively.
Yeah, because like maybe a dad, he wants a boy and then it's a girl and he's like, oh, like, I don't know. If I was a child, I'd be like, okay, thanks,
Yeah, really. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it creates a little more sense of bonding, that it's kind of this like, okay, I know what I'm having and then I can plan, but it's like, it's taking that gender bias even earlier before birth nowadays. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like, with it being kind of a new thing that people are actually talking about nowadays, it's definitely something to like think about whenever, I know in the next, 10 years or so, if any of us want to have kids, that's going to be something that we have to think about, and so it's definitely something that's like relevant to us for sure. So very interesting. Anyone else have anything they want to add to that question? And I'll just say it again, just so what are ways that sexism is prevalent even from the time we were babies? Anything that anyone wanted to add just before we move on to the next one?
One thing that I would add is like the heteronormative stuff, where I've seen like when people are commenting on babies, like if it's a little boy, like, oh, you're gonna woo the girls and knock them off their feet, that kind of stuff, like assuming that they're straight at such an early age also. Yeah.
right, well, I will share the screen again. We'll go back into this. So something that was in the book was like calling these baby girls beautiful. And, that's something, that's only said about baby girls. You don't really say it too much about a baby boy, but it's just something that's said to baby boys. And then another thing that's just from the time we were babies and really young is that you're gifted Barbies. And so we'll kind of like delve into that in a little bit. But I have another question for us. Just why do you think calling baby girls beautiful is problematic in general? So stop share.
It makes it sound like that's what they're supposed to do for their whole lives, It's like, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It makes it seem like, beauty is the most important characteristic that a baby can, or like that anyone can have, and just kind of, puts that bias on these children from the time they're babies. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Does anyone else have any like ideas on that as well?
Yeah, it's kind of just like you're reducing their worth down to, their appearance instead of being like, oh, you're so smart and that kind of thing. It really bothers me when people don't just say things like, oh, you're so beautiful and not any other characteristics, because like you can do that, babies are smart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My friends who know me, who know what I do for research, like when they've had babies, they know why I'm doing this, but I'll be like, oh, she looks like she's going to be brilliant, or she looks like she's going to change the world, kind of stuff.
Right. I will share again, I guess. All right. So now we're gonna go into Barbies, and these are just like some of the facts that were in the book. And so 59% of girls in the US own Barbies, and 92% of girls aged 2 through 12 own Barbies, which that's a lot. I'm just curious, just like, I don't know, show of hands or whatever, how many of y'all owned Barbies when you were little? Yeah, majority of us did. That's, something that's so normal and something that's gifted. I know that I was never one to pick out Barbies, but we definitely had them in my house. I was very tomboyish because I have 2 older brothers, and so I was playing sports, but it's definitely something that, was still in our house, even though I never picked that out. And then something interesting about Barbies is what they would look like in real life based on their proportions is they would be 6 feet tall, with nothing wrong with being tall. I am 5'9". So, but they'd have, it's just the proportions in like contrast to one another is not right. And that's what I really love about this picture on the side that we'll go through. But they have a 39-inch bust, 18-inch waist, 33-inch hips, and they also, the hip waist to hip ratio, which we've talked a little bit about, is that 0.55, which is like, you'd be very malnourished and, underweight if that was so. And then they also have no sexual, or oh, we went past, no like reproductive organs or anything like that. No like clitoris, vagina, nipples. So it's kind of, taking away from that fact that, or really adding to that idea that, women shouldn't be pleasured. And so just, kind of adding to that. But I found this picture on the internet, and I thought this was so interesting. It, goes through all the different proportions. And so something I found super interesting is that Barbies actually have a size 3 children's foot size. So that would be the size of their foot. And if they're 6 feet tall and have a size 3 feet, that doesn't, they would have to walk on all fours to be able, like, they would just have to walk on all fours to be able to support. And their neck is actually 2 times longer than it should be, but it's only like 6 inches around. So they would not be able to hold up their head. just, some little things like that, that it's, showing this idealized body, but it's not functional at all. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Be hard to make it through the day like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And then have y'all heard of Rachel Evans? I don't know if y'all have. I heard about this a while ago, but this woman, she spent about $42,000 to look like Barbie. So this is a picture of her on the side. And she had 112 surgeries to be able to look like Barbie. Like, to be able to look like this, that's what she had to do. And so it just shows you how unrealistic it is for the proportions and everything of the Barbie. She had to spend a lot of money and have a lot of surgeries to be able to do that. And this is a quote from an article that she was interviewed in, and it says, "I'm 100% addicted to getting surgery to look like Barbie." And I just found that really scary, that I'm sure if we looked into her past more, she was probably gifted Barbies from the start, and it's just kind of scary that that level of obsession came from that. And I have the article down here too, if anyone would like to look into. I can put it in the chat or whatever at the end if anyone's interested in that, but just thought it was a real life example that was kind of interesting too. So my first question is, why do we think Barbies are harmful to children? So I'm going to stop share real quick just before. I know it's kind of in the book a little bit, but if anyone has ideas on that.
Most people don't think they're harmful, right? I mean, most people are like, it's just a doll,
Yeah.
I know when I was a kid, I played with them all the time. And I just really thought it was, because I played with my sisters a lot, and we just thought it was fun to dress them up, because it was we wish we could do the same, go out and get all these really cool outfits. But after reading that chapter, it definitely became more obvious why it would be harmful. And as you said, it's a lot of disproportions and just unrealistic standards. And clearly that the previous slide you just talked about goes to show that some people want to achieve those unrealistic standards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's harmful in the same way that magazines and social media are harmful for us as adults. Is it's children's first exposure to this beauty ideal, but I don't know, I think it's just damaging for self-confidence, because kids are getting exposed to what they think they're supposed to look like from such a young age, and it's not realistic whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think it's even more harmful if white Barbies are given to little kids of color?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Even though Barbie has gotten more inclusive and has shown more representation within the past couple of years, I still think they have a lot of work to do on their representation, because from the beginning, it's always just been the thin, white, blonde hair, blue-eyed girls, and that kind of thing. So in order to break that down and kind of rework that, they have a lot of work to do.
One of the responses that Mattel gave in some article that I read was part of the excuse of why they don't make different body shapes is they would have to make all these different sized clothing, that it's cheaper for them to have a standard body size and just make clothing to fit that Barbie.
Which, it's interesting that they still, if you chose one, why did you choose that one unrealistic body size? I mean, it makes sense, if you don't have enough money to make the clothes, or you don't want people to have to buy the clothes or whatever, but why'd you choose that body type that's hardly anyone has? So kind of interesting to think about that.
Yeah,
for sure. Does anyone else have anything to add?
just to comment, I don't want to steal your thunder if you're heading here, Sophie. But just to comment on that weird body shape that they picked, did y'all pick up on the original was like a sex toy?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was horrifying to me. We have a slide on that too, but
okay.
yeah, that was definitely horrifying. So, all right, I'm going to share screen again and we will keep on moving. So, let's see. Let it load. So yeah, we just, talked about some of the reasons that we think that it's harmful to children. And so we're just gonna delve into some of the research studies that showed this. And so the first study we're gonna look at was done in 2006. And there were 3 different conditions, I guess. And one group of children were given the Barbie. One was given the Emmy on English, which is this doll over here. So it's something that's I think in England, and it is much more proportional and like normal size compared to the Barbie. So that's some were given this Barbie who has a completely different body size that's unrealistic, and the other group was given the Emmy on English, and that's more realistic, and other ones were given no doll at all. And then they found that body dissatisfaction was highest in those assigned to play with Barbie. So that proves that just then and there. But the scary thing is that it had a greater effect on younger girls. And so, from the time that they're old enough to play with Barbies, that's when they're, already starting to develop this body dissatisfaction that will, go throughout their lives. And you're just starting it right there, which is really scary. And then there was another one done in 2016, kind of the same idea. There were 3 different dolls, and then one group was also given a non-doll, so which would be like a My Little Pony or something like that. And there were 4 different assigned conditions for this one. So like some were able to just like touch be able to hold it and play with the Barbie. Some were only allowed to look at it. Some were, look at a book, that kind of thing. There were those different assigned conditions. And they found that no matter like what condition, that Barbie's appearance did create a thin deal internalization in all that like played with the Barbie in any capacity. So those just kind of prove the point that they are harmful to children on this like mental level that can, go throughout their lives, and that's really scary. So this is what Dr. Marks was talking about there, that the Lily doll is the one showed here that was we can just look at her for a second.
Yeah.
And just that's to each their own, if you like to, like, if anyone likes to dress like that, but or it's not as much about that, but that's just what the fact of what it was is more so is the problem. And it was a prostitute is what it was made after, and it was handed around at bachelor parties, and so given to these men, and it was like sexualizing her breasts and everything. You can just imagine, like Dr. Marks put in her book, just imagine them passing it around. And so that's what we chose to model our children's toys off of, which is horrifying. But I thought what was even more horrifying to me is this this picture here on the left is a model. Barbie came with a diet book, and this was in 1963, if I remember correctly. I did some research into it, and so it came with this diet book here, and it just specifically said don't eat. So you're have these little children that's what they're learning, and not only that, but it also came with a scale, and this scale was stuck at 110 pounds. Ooh. Which, if you're a smaller person, is higher than you need. And if like you're as tall as me, I would be severely malnourished if I weighed 110 pounds. And so, it's just, again, idealizing that body weight of 110, which would not give you the proper nutrition, and you wouldn't be a healthy person in general. And it's, you're starting these children off on that, which is really scary. So I'm just gonna stop sharing just so we can kind of talk about this real quick, and just I want to hear y'all's ideas on, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, or if you guys read about it, just your ideas on it, because I know it was horrifying to me. So
Yeah, I actually didn't know that the diet book was like one of the first things that came out with the Barbie dolls. So I was really shocked about that and yeah, horrified because I think it plays into a lot of our diet culture, which is very unhealthy, as we've talked about previously. So yeah, those were my little thoughts about it.
There's a little bit of white supremacy in that too, because trying to be lean is more of a white girl and a white woman type of thing. So I find it fascinating that Mattel developed the doll, but then like exaggerated the white messaging, if that makes some sense. Like, whoa.
Anyone else have anything to add? I know that was horrifying to me, and so I just like sat there on that page for a really long time. I had to like fact check. I was like, there's no way that they legit put "do not eat" into a diet book. I was like, Dr. Martz, there's no way, you've got to be wrong. And I had to look into it, and it's
I didn't make this stuff up.
I mean, I trust you, but I was like appalled, of course. And I was like, when was this? And whatnot. So definitely,
Yeah.
me for sure.
Well, and the messaging there that I don't think little kids pick up on. It's like when I hear a certain song like Grease Lightning, as an example, when I heard that song as a kid, I'm just like, oh, Grease Lightning. And then as an adult, I listen to the lyrics and I even watch how they dance. And it's like, whoa, there's all kinds of sexual innuendo in there, right? So a lot of times we see things as adults that we didn't see as children. But the fact that that doll was portrayed, very sexual for men's enjoyment, but she doesn't have any of the requisite sexual parts that would give her any pleasure. What kind of message is that too? It's very much objectifying women, that you're meant to give men pleasure, but not have any of your own.
Yeah. All right. Well, if no one has anything else to add, I'll share again, and we're going to move on to Disney princesses. And this is definitely more my area of expertise. My family went to Disney at least like once a year, if not twice a year, growing up. And so this is definitely something that I'm more familiar with, and something that I don't think about a lot. But the first question that I have is there anything that bothers you as a feminist about what, like, the Disney princess movies, and when you're watching them, like what you think about now? Stop share.
I read something or like saw like an Instagram or something post a while ago, and it was talking about how Disney movies always have to have like kind of like the man save them in the end, or like kind of something along those lines of like they need the prince, or it's kind of centered around the prince like in the end. So it's like they need a man to kind of save them, or to be able to like complete their journey or whatever, which I don't think is how it should be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just, they're dependent on the man in all the different storylines. If you look at every single princess movie, you can see it clear as day right there, and that's kind of, what they're trying to show, is that, women have their place, and that men are like, we're dependent on them, is, what it's showing. So it's a good point.
Yeah, something that has always bothered me is the fact that a lot of the princesses have very little speaking roles. An example would be like Ariel. Half of the movie she spends without her voice, and so she relies on her beauty to get the man, which is very annoying. And of course, as a young child, that was my favorite movie, and I didn't realize it, and now I'm just like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, again, showing that beauty is paramount in attracting a handsome prince. That's what you need. As long as you're pretty, you're good to go. And it's, showing that, from the beginning of calling baby girls beautiful, it's, again, like, conditioned here in princess movies too.
So I actually wrote my reflection about Ariel because like I have red hair. So growing up, people always compared me to Ariel, and I despised it as a kid. Like even as a kid, I hated it. And I used to tell people, I was like, she gives up a part of herself to be with a man she doesn't know. Like I would never do that. And like as a 6-year-old, I was like, no, stop telling me that. And so I used to say a lot like I liked Belle because she was smart, and that was like a big part of her trait. And I really liked Mulan because she like outdid the guys. And so those two movies as a kid is something that I really cared about. And I think that's the emphasis that my parents put on education over beauty, definitely, and just like being strong and a strong female. And I think they emphasize that a lot. And so I think I internalized that as a kid, even before I realized.
Your parents helped you kind of counter it, it sounds like. And it sounds like they were kind of deliberate about it too. Yeah. Yeah. How many of you like never caught on to any of this stuff when you were watching this growing up? Because I think for a lot of people, it just, yeah, it's just like you don't realize it. You're just sort of fed it. Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, whenever I grew up watching all this stuff all the time, and I still love it to this day, but I never like analyzed it so much back then. And like hearing everyone speak today, like even like it just kind of shows that there are things to be noticed like on a deeper level. I always just thought like all those movies were just romantic, like when the guy saved her, and like, but it is like pointing out Ariel gave up a part of herself and stuff. Like I just wouldn't have thought of it like that back then. So it's like nice to hear any perspective.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything they want to add to this?
Going off of that, yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I felt that I really recognized the romance, and I had a parent who didn't show me that much affection outwardly, so I always looked for affection in like media and was like, I wish I had that kind of love kind of thing, I guess. And I always wanted just romantic or any kind of love really. And so I was like obsessed with that, and I never really thought much about it. But now that I've learned more about it throughout the years, I can see how it's problematic, especially other topics and things like that. Because like being a member of like the Red Flag campaign here on campus, in our tier 1 presentation, we talk about how consent is really important, of course, as you hear a lot in other classes and things like that on campus. And so we talk about like oh god, what's it called, Sleeping Beauty, and how she's asleep and doesn't give permission for this person to come into her home and kiss her. And like I'm like, oh, that's so romantic, he's like finding the one that he loves, and he's her Prince Charming, and he's gonna come save her. But then you think about it and you're like, oh, they don't know each other at all, and he is not asking permission and kind of violating her in this way. And I just would have never thought about those things growing up, but I'm glad that I have an education now.
Well, and that whole idea that, I mean, I think romantic love is important in the beginning of a partnership. But that idea that that is supposed to last, like that rarely lasts, that's, that's hormonal, and it's that limerence that we get. And it's meant, if you think about it in terms of evolution, it is meant to bring man and woman together to reproduce. That's what it's about. And it, it functions that way in a lot of times, but that doesn't last. That's not real love. So what an interesting message there. One of the things that did strike me growing up, a lot of stuff just went over my head, was the idea that like marriage is the starting point for a woman, that whole, and it's like, yeah, like you're just sort of living life to wait until that happens. And then the assumption that that's going to be like, beautiful and glorious forever, which is not how it works out for a lot of people. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I feel like there's two sides to that coin too. Some people think that like your life begins at marriage, and other people are like your life ends at marriage. And I feel, it's just like the two sides of the coin, and it stems from a place of our role models for that, like, relationships and everything have not been the best ones. Looking at, Cinderella, her, life didn't begin until marriage. Really, she had this terrible life and she needed a man to rescue her from her, step siblings and her stepmother. So, it's kind of interesting with that.
And Sophie, even that stereotype, and the stereotype is that women can't wait to get married, and that men are like, oh, let's hold off. I want to be, not held down kind of thing longer. Yeah. But the actual psychological data, women benefit on average more financially from marriage than men do on average. But it's men's emotional, psychological health that benefits much more than women being partnered and married to a woman than vice versa. So it's interesting, like you've got this stereotype, but the reality of what the data suggests is the opposite. And it's the same kind of thing after a breakup or after divorce. Men really don't fare nearly as well as women do, because women are usually have other friendships and family that they rely on, and men are oftentimes like cut off, like they're just kind of cut off from their emotional support, which is why many men very quickly find another partner and tend to remarry much more quickly than women do. So again, the stereotype doesn't fit reality. It's interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. Anyone else want to add anything from this discussion on all of this? It's been a big one. All right, I'll share screen. So yeah, we hit, most of the points there, which is awesome. And I have this picture over here too, that goes, through the different princesses and basically what's wrong with their story from this idea. So if y'all want to look at that for a second, but I'm just gonna go over it. We hit the dependent on a man. That was one of the first things. Damsel in distress, that they have to be rescued by this man. Suggests that life begins at marriage for all of these women. Beauty is paramount in attracting a handsome prince, and we talked a little bit about that contrast between men and women in society. They do the cooking and the cleaning, and they're have the children and everything, and the men are usually the one that are more powerful in these movies and have that they're able to do more and they're ruling the kingdom and whatnot, and the women are just kind of like on their side. And I liked how, I can't remember who said it, but talking about how honestly the women don't have a lot of speaking roles in these movies. And it's interesting because the movies' names are Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, it's all about them, but it's really not too much about them. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. And then finally, the idea that beauty is good and ugly is bad. And that's something that we're gonna go into on this next slide. And this was a study that Dr. Marks was a part of. And I found this one really interesting. So in the study, there were 42 children ages 6 through 12. And they either watched a film with a high or low bias on beauty is good. And so a high bias on beauty is good would be like Cinderella, and low bias on beauty is good would be like The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Just, for an example. So they would watch this, and then after they watched it, they were shown 2 pictures of an unattractive and attractive child, which were, done, they were predetermined to be unattractive or attractive. And I'm not sure, Dr. Marks, exactly how y'all did. It was by college students, correct?
Yeah, it was a pilot study. So we had college students take all these pictures and rank order them in order of what they considered to be attractive and unattractive. And just like we talked about the babies research the other day, adults and children are quite consistent and reliable even with one another in their ability to do that, to sort of place people in what they consider to be levels of attractiveness. So the college students did that first. And then we used what would be considered a very attractive and unfortunately a very unattractive child to show these children. Yeah.
Yes. So they were shown these pictures and they were asked like behavioral characteristics, like how good do you think this child is, or something like that. And they found that regardless of what film the kids watched, the children rated behavioral characteristics more favorably for the attractive child photo. So they said that the kid who was more attractive in the photo was like good compared to the other one. So it's, going back to this beauty is good and ugly is bad study that's kind of like ingrained into us. It's very interesting, to think about.
And this explains, this is, part of the evolutionary biology, psychology that, again, I don't like, but this explains a lot of childhood cruelty and childhood bullying, which is sad. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So now we're gonna switch a little bit, and this is the last thing that we're really gonna talk about. This was like the last thing in my part of the chapter, and that was sociocultural issues and weight. And this one will kind of be a little more easy to talk about because we hit on this earlier in the semester, more so when we talked about like obesity and different like eating disorders and whatnot. And so we talked about this early in the semester, but the richer people are, the thinner they tend to be. And my question for all of you is, why do you think this is? We'll stop sharing so we can see everyone.
Well, this is really true for like United States and a lot of Western countries, but not all countries, because the different, or I guess like economy of the different countries, yeah, it changes how like the rich are portrayed. But in the United States, it's definitely because healthy food options are very expensive, or definitely they cost more in general, and so a lot of people with more money have access to that, as well as food deserts. So a lot of low income communities live in food deserts and don't even have access to healthy foods at all. They just have access to fast foods. And so this contributes a lot into the difference in like weight between the socioeconomic status.
Absolutely, yeah.
And people can afford like personal trainers, they can afford supplements, they can afford the body change, like surgeries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And gym memberships, things like that. And then I even hear, when it comes to like thinking about like a gym, I hear large people complain that it's really hard to get affordable exercise clothing, as an example. Whereas it's really easy if you are a smaller person to find that kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on here. Other things, other thoughts?
I know, like, as college students, I feel like we can relate to this a little bit more. It's sometimes really hard for us to eat healthy. I know I struggle with that because it's so much easier to just buy ramen noodles or like go to Cookout and get a $5 tray, and so it's a lot more expensive to buy those, like the fresh produce and everything. And, it takes a lot of time also, to prepare everything and these fresh foods. And when you are like, you are low income, you have to work more to be able to, get that food. And so you don't have as much time to cook also. So it's kind of like a double whammy there, and like not having enough time to prepare it and also not having enough money to buy that food. So I know that's something that a lot of us relate to for sure.
One of the things that Michelle Obama did, and you all remember her campaign, was Let's Move. And then she had the vegetable garden at the White House and would bring, kids in field trips to the vegetable garden. And we know that kids that grow vegetables are a lot more likely to eat them than kids who don't. But one of the things that she did is negotiate with Walmart to try to keep fruit and vegetable prices lower. Because those kinds of things are really tend to be very expensive. But I thought that was a really nice thing that she did, more on a policy or negotiation level. Yeah.
For sure. Anyone else have anything to add about the like sociocultural issues and weight and everything like that?
I do think about like if you drive around or ride around in rural areas, Dollar General stores are popping up everywhere. And I don't know if you've been in one and shopped, but the food, it's like, there's some frozen stuff, really processed. Oh my gosh, people who rely on that for their grocery shopping can't be eating very well.
Yeah.
It's sad.
All right, so I will share again if no one has anything else to add. So yeah, that was a very good discussion because we've talked about it previously, and that lack of income is tied to poor eating habits. And there was this study that looked at a vast variety of different studies that looked at fast food restaurants, and we talked about this specifically earlier in the semester, that the fast food restaurants tend to be located in the low income areas compared to the like middle and high income areas, because that's where they get the most business and everything, and those people, that's what they have to do to be able to feed their family. And so that's very interesting to see that trend. And even that becomes, if you do that, or like your parents feed you fast food, it's like a hard habit to break. It just keeps going. If that's what you're used to, that's what you'll feed your kids. Whatever you ate, you'll feed your kids, and kind of thing. And it just keeps going throughout the generations. But I thought another thing that was interesting is that weight gain has increased throughout history. So we're getting heavier and heavier as a population, but the stigma against obesity is also increasing and is becoming more rampant just in our society, which I thought was interesting. It's like, how do you combat that if we're gaining weight? And it's not all our I feel like it's a societal problem as a whole. But it's interesting that even though it is they're still not tolerating it as well. And not that it should be tolerated, we should do something about it for the health of our country, but be more accepting, I guess, of like the different weights too. And I wanted to end on some semi-good news from the chapter, pull some different things. And obviously there's a lot of work to be done in many different places, but wanted to talk about some of the good news of what's happening. First off, we're going to hit on Frozen, the first, everyone's calling it the first feminist princess movie. And we talked about this a couple classes ago. And obviously there's, the waist to hip ratio is still 0.55. But how many of y'all have seen Frozen? Has everyone seen it? Yeah. I do appreciate the fact that, it has these strong female, and I think about it, I'm like, is it actually the first feminist princess movie? Like, what about, are we forgetting Mulan?
Yeah.
But I understand, it's, they don't need the men, and they're ruling Arendelle together, and that's like really nice to see the strong female, they're taking charge and they're not relying on a man, and they're not dependent. A lot of the things that we see that are wrong in of the other princess movies in terms of that, but obviously specifically with Fat Talk, it's not helping with the body idealization of the princesses as well. But other good news is that there was a decrease in body dissatisfaction for women, and so that's pretty good news. But why do you guys think this is, that there's been that decrease in body dissatisfaction? I'll stop sharing real quick.
And what time period are you referring to, Sophie?
In the last 14 years, there's been that decrease in body dissatisfaction.
The ideals for a while there were very, very lean. Runway models, a lot of female actors were very lean. Do you all think that the trend for more muscularity or more strength or more curves has been beneficial to a lot of women?
I mean, we have like the plus size models that are becoming more apparent in like media and magazines. So I think there's more acceptance of like the curves and just different body weights in general.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we would change our definition on plus size though, because I still think it feeds into the thin ideal, because like a lot of like people who are plus size are just typical size. So
Have you all heard of vanity sizing and how some clothing companies do that? It's the cheaper clothes, you're more likely the size that you go get, like let's say you're a 12 and you go get a 12 in the cheaper clothing. But if you were to go to a more expensive store, then your size in that more expensive clothing might be a 10 or an 8. And the vanity part of that is like, oh, I feel good. I'm in an 8 or I'm in a 10 when normally I wear a 12. And so it's just interesting. They make their sizes bigger in the more expensive clothing stores. So they're like cheating the game. But Jamie, what do you think of that term plus? What would be a better name?
I know that like some places are just saying like curvy, versus, like the plus size is like the, the curvy. But I feel like sometimes that's more of a style of, different outfits and whatnot. But sometimes places are using that, which I think is better than plus size. But that's a good question. I'm not really sure. If anyone else has any ideas, I would love to. That is a great question.
Well, and there's some clothing, I guess brands is the right word, that do that one size fits all. And it's like, how? I don't understand that. Do you think just numbers on dress sizes and not use the plus? I can't think of a better word.
Yeah.
honestly, I would love if we stopped with the women measurements and just went to actual measurements. Like men's pants, they can walk into a store and be like, oh, I need this length and this waist. And like, that's how they're sized. And I'm like, no, it's like, that's not even an option. So I would love if we completely changed the way how we like, I guess the measurements and stuff and numbering on our clothes.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of women complain with the dress sizes being the way they are, that either lack of curves or a special curves, the dress doesn't fit, because it's sort of made for this one type of shaped woman. And so I do hear women complain about that. I've heard women complain about finding jeans that feel right. Yeah. Yeah, so the measurements would be pant size would make sense, but like top size would be your bust, I guess, or.
But then you're like, I know something that I really struggle with, because especially with like dresses, my legs are so long, and so everything looks short on me. And I try, like, I'm a very modest person. I don't like to like flaunt myself at all. And so it's really hard for me. And even with jeans, they like are always capris on me. I can't find that, like, even the tall ones are capris. Like it's really, and so it's, that's different than, the like fat talk and the body idealization, but it kind of goes in line with it. There's people in all different heights, sizes, shapes, that we really don't account for in a lot of, and it's harder for, different, unless you're the most normal size, and hardly, anyone is. I don't know the exact percentages on what people are type, that type, but it's definitely difficult for, I feel like, a lot of people, for sure.
And definitely with the jeans, because my mom is also very tall, so she has that issue, and we talk a lot about like men's jeans have like a waist circumference, and then they have different lengths for different height guys. And I'm like, that just makes sense. Why do they not have that for women? And it's just not available. And I think even with dresses, I think they should offer like different length dresses.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, short of having a personal tailor.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just a common complaint for a lot of people.
Anyone else have anything to add?
If you think of a better term over plus size, the only term that comes to my mind is nourished. For those of you who are nourished, here's your clothing. I don't think that would fly.
Definitely not. All right, so we'll finish up here. Let me go back to so yeah, the question that I asked at there that got us talking about all of that was, why do you think there has been a decrease in body dissatisfaction over the past 14 years? And these were a couple examples in the book. So the body acceptance movement, a lot of feminist movements, are, it's not just a one size fits all thing. We're trying to love on our bodies no matter what size. And like we talked about, more representation of normal sized women in media in general. And, we talked about having, the plus size, which I would also love for there to be, they're normal. They really are like normal size. And so then I look at it, I'm like, so am I plus size? Which would be like, I don't care, but it's, I look at these women and it's like, I never thought that I was, but then you look and it's like, oh, well, maybe, I am plus sized. And it's, we still have a long ways to go, but there is more representation in the media in general of different body types and sizes. And then finally, mothers trying to buffer sociocultural pressures for their young girls, specifically going back to the Barbies. A lot of moms are like boycotting Barbies now, or just like not buying them for their young girls after, a lot of this has surfaced on the history of Barbies, and just in general, the people are realizing more and more that it it's harmful to these children. So mothers trying to buffer this, there has been a decrease in body dissatisfaction for women. So all good news, and obviously a lot of room for improvement, but I thought this would be a good thing for us to end on today. So I guess I'll stop share, and then if anyone wants to like add anything or have any questions about anything that I just went over or that we want to talk about more, just figured I'd open up the floor for any of those questions.
I've got an example of one of my friends who has raised a wonderful daughter, had the Wii, the exercise, the game Wii, but apparently, you all tell me, I've never had a Wii. There was a function that would tell her how many calories she would burn, or what kind of food, what types of food she would burn off by doing certain types of exercises. And I know my friend was just like, oh my gosh, I don't want her exposed to that. Like, I don't want her thinking when she's playing and moving around and having fun, that that's why she's doing that, to burn off food or burn off calories. Yeah. Can y'all think of any other examples of buffering? If you were buffered or not, or if in the future you were to have a daughter, how you think you might approach certain things?
I think going back to what we talked at the beginning about the different gender stereotypes, instead of doing, the traditional like pink for girls, blue for boys, having like a lot of people are doing more like gender neutral nurseries and, that kind of thing, bringing, babies used to be put in, and I did an internship in the hospital and the birthing center. And so I like worked with a lot of the like NICU nurses and everything like that. And they're trying to get away from just putting unless the parents request it, they're trying to do it in white to, like, put the babies in the white instead of the blue and the pink. So I thought that was kind of interesting, a way that, you know, medically they're trying to buffer it too, like in the hospitals too, to, you know, be supportive for different like gender, you know, not be as biased for the gender roles and whatnot.
When my sons were young, I never bought, well, one of my sons bought my other son a Barbie for Christmas as a joke one time, but I didn't buy Barbies for them, but I did have dolls for them. And I still remember my son would take his doll and he would hold it by the foot and drag it around the house so it'd be bouncing on its head. And I remember thinking, oh, this is backfired, isn't it? Like, you know, I've given them a doll so they will become nurturing and, you know, and that kind of thing. And here he is abusing his kid. Can you think of other examples? He's since retired, but a former faculty member man in our department had one son, and I still remember having a conversation with him. His son wanted for Christmas an easy bake oven, and this was highly upsetting to this male professor, highly upsetting. And I remember, like, you know, both boys and girls and men and women eat. Don't you want your child to have some practice at making food, you know, that kind of thing? But it was just very, very threatening to the dad that his son wanted a easy bake oven. Did y'all ever have those? It's the little stove, and it cooked with the light bulb, and you do the cake batter and you put it in and it would, yeah, okay. But isn't that what, I mean, don't we want both men and women to be able to prepare food and cook? Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I know that my family so like my aunt got a double major in computer science and engineering or something. And so I feel like my family really encouraged us to pursue whatever we wanted. And so they provided me with like science stuff and like books and also like art and the ability to do it. So I feel like they just like gave us a very wide variety and was just like, you can be anything, like, and we want to encourage you to figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy. So I feel like that helped buffer a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like that definitely. But yeah, like, I mean, even things of being able to expose children to all kinds of different toys, because toys are about practicing life. I mean, in a lot of ways, they're kind of practicing careers, practicing life. The stuff that you build with certainly is valuable in the brain development, right? But so much of the Barbies and the dolls are for little girls, like your job in life is to have children, right? You know, and it's sort of that practice at that. Other thoughts of what you've kind of seen parents do or not do? I mean, there are parents nowadays that are deliberately not naming their child a boy or a girl. So kind of raising, is non-binary the right word in that context, you all? Or unisex? Am I getting the right words? I don't want to. So like when parents do that, when parents raise a child and they're not explicitly, you know, with the name, the dress.
Non-binary, and I think that you can now wait until they're 1 year old to put it on their birth certificate, their gender.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So in certain places, I can't remember exactly where, but I remember reading about that somewhere. So
interesting. When you think of all the forms that ask for that, I mean, nowadays in college surveys, we're a little more woke. We give people other options other than male, female type of thing. But most forms, I mean, in the real world, we had a speaker come to ASU a couple of years ago, and he's a trans man. And I remember one of the things that he said, if you go to DMV and you don't check male or female, the nice lady across the counter will assign you one. And it was like, yeah. Yeah. Can you think of other things that buffer for kids? You're going to see later in one of the later chapters, I am a big fan of girls playing sports. And there's some really fun data on how healthy that is. But I like the fitness. I like the competitiveness, that it's okay, that there's a place. for that. I find it really, I don't do any, I was never a fast runner, but I used to do road races, and every now and then, although they've all been canceled in the pandemic, we'll do these bike races. And I love it because it's like one place in my life I can let my competitive spirit out. But there's so many other places in my life, like that's not allowed. You know, it's not feminine, if that makes sense. It's just like not allowed. So I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. So that's one thing parents can do, is get their daughters involved in sports, or I know a lot of parents that have dance kids, get them in, both boy and girl, in dance, that kind of thing.
I know for me, my grandma, I grew up in like a multi-generational household. So when my mom was like going to school, my grandparents would like take care of me during the day and stuff like that. And so my grandma was like very big on gender roles, and she wanted me to be very well-rounded as like I guess like I don't need a man type of deal. So she wanted me to learn how like landscaping, and if my grandpa like went on the roof to clean the gutters, like I had to go. If we had to like put down mulch and do all that stuff, like I had to do. If we had to move tables, and I mean, she would always wait until I took a nap to like hang things on the wall or like move and like decorate the house, because she'd get in trouble. And like, so I'd be doing like the moving for her. So like now, since I'm older, I find myself like almost teaching my boyfriend how to do some things that like would go into the gender roles of like what a male should be doing, because his parents were opposite, and they were kind of like, no, that's my baby, like he can't lift a finger and break his nail. Whereas like me, I'm like, no, you're gonna scrape your legs and we're gonna fix this car. So I know my grandma's very big on like always have a home cooked meal at night, like put on your apron and dance in the kitchen and cook, but you don't need a man to like change your tire at the same time.
I like that. I like that spirit of, you know, again, it's like guys need to know how to fix food. Gals need to know how to change a tire in a car. Or yeah, I had this conversation with one of my friends who's quite woke. So it's an interesting conversation that I have. But she's a single mom, and her son is off at college, and the son would normally take care of the yard. Well, she has a daughter who's very strong. And, you know, I'll have this conversation of, why don't you encourage her to mow? Well, I don't want her to mow. Well, isn't it a good thing for her to know how to mow? You know, mow the yard and, you know, do the weed trimmer and that kind of thing. And it's just like, I hit up against this, I don't want her to, as opposed to, you know, it's like she could, you know, she's strong. Yeah. Alea, I'm curious if that's cultural in your family lineage, or is that particular personalities of grandmothers?
I think it's probably just like how she grew up, because she's Italian and Irish, like a mix of both of them. So she has like a temper, but she's also like very strong-willed. And when she grew up, her sister was very much like Barbie dolls, fingernail painted, like doesn't do anything, like doesn't even like move a finger around the house. Like the mom would clean her room, whereas my grandma, she was very tomboyish and always wanted to be out with her dad doing like all the, I guess, like gender norms of like what a man should do around the house. And she loved like the independence of it. And so she said that she saw from a young age that I was just very independent too. And she saw that like how she was when she was younger, and her dad took advantage of it. So she wanted to take advantage of kind of making me like a well-rounded person. And I know that like even if my kids aren't independent, they're still gonna like not believe in gender roles and not have to like rely on a man to hang a picture frame or like change a tire on the side of the road, because that's just how like my grandparents raised me.
Yeah, I can tell you about the transition that happened to my son. So I was single parenting them when they were teenagers. And I used to do all their laundry. And then we kind of hit this age. I was like, you know, they need to be able to do their laundry. So what we started doing is we would pull our laundry and we would take turns. So like one week I would do everybody's laundry, next week oldest son, next week youngest son. Well, they didn't like touching my bras and my underwear. And that inspired them. They're like, we'll just do our own laundry. And I was like, cool. After that, but it was like, that was the breaking point for them, was dealing with the female stuff. And it was like, okay, it worked. What else? Have you all thought about, for those of you who might want kids in the future, it sounds like Alea, you've thought about this a bit. Have others thought about how you want to?
If I had like a daughter, I would want to raise her like independent, or just knowing how to change a tire, like how to cook and just stuff like that. But I wouldn't want her to be like afraid of males or whoever she liked, to come at her saying like, you're too independent, and like just being fearful of that. Because I think, I don't know, I see like a lot of jokes that guys say, or hear a lot of jokes, and it's just, why are you scared of that? Like, I don't know, it just confuses me. Or also, to go back to the toys, like, and how it kind of trains us for life. I think it's weird to give like babies to like babies, and or just like Barbies, they get the house and they just stay at home and they have to like create drama in their head, versus like my brother got like building blocks, Legos and stuff like that. So like, I don't know, I'd rather like boy toys personally. So like, I like that. Yeah.
They're more action oriented, or you could be more creative with them, like I
Yeah.
told you about loving to go to my cousin's house and play with the boy toys, like
Yeah.
every day,
Yeah, like I would want to build something cool rather than just like make up a scenario in my dollhouse, like, oh, you're home late from like work or something like that. Like that's what like I had that creativity. So
Well, you're getting at a good point. And we've talked about this before, that how high self-esteem men are more likely to, if they're straight, to be attracted to high self-esteem, smarter women.
Mhm.
But the intelligence piece, the independence piece, for a lot of men can feel threatening, which is a shame. Yeah. It's kind of like it takes a strong man to be with a strong woman.
yeah.
And I would imagine that's the same in gay couples too. It takes a strong person to be with another strong person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I could, I guess, like touch on that a little bit too. The person that I was with in high school, he was like a very strong-willed person as well, and I'm like a very strong person. And my mom said that she could always see us like challenging each other, because there would be some things where he'd be like, "Oh no, 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 like that's my role, like I'm gonna do that," and I'm like, "No, there's no such thing as roles. Like what you can do, I can do." And I can possibly like do it better than you. And so like I would turn it into a challenge to like prove it to him that he's not more superior than me. But I found myself like constantly arguing with him, because like he was raised, I guess, from like Iowa. So like they were very into gender roles, like the man does everything for the woman. And so like sometimes I would like sneak up and like pay for the meal before him, and he would feel like that was the most disrespectful thing in the world, because he, like the cashier, he would feel like the cashier was saying about him that he couldn't afford to pay for us. And I was like, no, like that cashier was probably like, wow, like they have an equal relationship. So it was a constant like fighting, whereas like the person that I'm with now, he applauds me all the time for like being such an independent person, because he's never met someone who has like tried to challenge gender norms like I guess so much before. So I think that's very interesting.
Do any of you have parents that worry that college is going to ruin that gender stereotyping? It sounds like many of you feel like your parents are like, yeah, like grow and be all that you can be, kind of thing. That's wonderful to hear that you all had that.
Or I didn't hear from my parents, but I heard from like my friends' parents. They're like, oh, you go to that like hippie school where everything's okay and like everyone does whatever they want. And I'm like, I don't know, I walked out. But yeah, it does exist, sadly.
It was tradition in my family. Both sides of my family are I've come from like low SES on both sides. And I still remember when I had just gotten my PhD. So 9 years of higher ed and an internship. And I had a newborn, and I was at a family reunion, and so many different female relatives asked me, so are you going to stay home with them? You going to stay home with them? You know, it was one of those, and it made me feel guilty over and over and over again. But it was one of those, like, I just spent 9 years becoming a professional. Can I now be that professional? You know, but it was that, you know, like, this is what you're supposed to do when you have a baby kind of thing. Yeah.
Talking about the baby thing, I think it's really cool that other countries have just like leave. And so it doesn't matter if it's like the mother or the father, like whichever parent can leave. And a lot of countries give the mother so much time and then also allow the father so much time to leave as well. And I just think that's super cool, and it encourages equality.
Yeah. We're overall in the United States, according to law, we're lousy. We're lousy compared to other countries. I can tell you though, this is just something you can say, yay, Mountaineers. Here at App State, there was no family leave when I had my second son here. There was like no such thing. So we figured it out. I've had somebody substitute for me for a while, but now we have a very generous family leave for professors. It's a full semester off, whether you are a dad, a mom, whether you adopt. If I had to go take care of my parents, as an example, I could take a semester off. You just have to kind of justify the medical need. I got into I could tell you a really interesting conversation though, where I was with a male faculty member who he took family leave when his son was born because his wife only got, I think she got just a month. So he was going to be the primary caretaker. Y'all got it? Okay. And he took family leave and took care of his son. But then we had another male faculty member asked to take family leave, but his wife was already a stay-at-home mom. And this first male faculty member was like, I don't know if he should be granted that because she's at home already. You know, why can't she take care of the baby? Got it? And I did step in on that one. It was like, okay, whoa. First of all, the law is there for bonding. You know, it's not just that there's somebody there watching the baby. It's there for bonding. And don't dads deserve to bond just like moms deserve to bond? And then the second thing I said is, we have no idea what happened to her after her first birth. She could have had severe postpartum depression. She could have had postpartum psychosis. You know, there could be a reason why both parents want to be there. And then even not only just the bonding, the true co-parenting. You know, it doesn't start out as true co-parenting when mom takes care of baby most of the time. You know, that sets it up for dad. In a lot of these relationships, dad plays with kids and then they're done. And, you know, but it sort of sets mom up for, you're the responsible one. But you're right, James. Other countries do such a better job, and they do such a better job of women are allowed to re-enter into the workforce without taking a penalty. So not only is it longer leave, but less penalty when they go back. And we've got shorter leave and much greater penalty when they go back. And then we talked about the pandemic's making that worse for a lot of women. Yeah. Yikes. Peyton, you look like you wanted to say something.
Dr. McClanahan talks a lot about this in the class of child development, child and adolescence development, and she gets into it in our book textbook. It actually had the research and numbers behind all of it, and it was really, we were at the bottom. Like, it was really sad with like parental leave and stuff.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's so much going on right now with the pandemic and with racism going on all over the place. But I hope this administration tries to start to push through some policy that makes some changes in some of that stuff, that makes it more of an equivalent playing field for men and women in the workforce. we'll see. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, Sophie? Anything else you want to wrap it up? All right. All right. Nice discussion, you all. Thanks for contributing. Okay, so I'll see you next week. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.